Hey guys, morning time here in Australia, also Mother's Day. I'm going to be heading to my mum's house with my wife and kids, and we're going to have a good Mother's Day. My sister's in town from Brisbane, and so this is like the first time that my parents have had their children and my children all in one place. So it's going to be really terrific. I'm not sure if you saw what happened with Ben Shapiro a couple of days ago now. It was aired on the BBC. He was being interviewed, and he did not handle it well, which is quite unlike Ben Shapiro because he's quite quick on his feet and very reasonable. But he didn't do a good job here, and I just wanted to kind of chat a bit about that. I don't know why I want to talk about it. I suppose I felt sorry for the guy. If you haven't seen it, maybe go watch that and then watch this first. It's about a 13-minute clip, but from the very beginning, you can see that Shapiro is agitated. He didn't really want to be there, that he was sort of attributing bad motives to the bloke interviewing him from the get-go. And the guy who was interviewing him, he was definitely raising some hard issues, some things that Shapiro had said several years ago that Shapiro has now retracted. But the interviewer was level-headed, and even if he was being snarky, obviously there was a much better way to handle it than he did. For those who haven't seen it, at the end, Shapiro basically says, look, this isn't worth my time. He took his clip off and said, I'm done with the interview. But before that, he said something even worse. He said something like, I'm really popular and no one's ever heard of you. Oh, no, don't do that. It's not good. First of all, it's not true. My understanding of this interviewer is he's quite a famous bloke in England. He's obviously an interviewer on the BBC, distinguished in some sense. I don't know in what sense. I don't know who he is really, but people seem to be saying that. But even if he wasn't popular, you don't say that. You suck, I'm cool. I'm really popular, no one likes you. People like me, you have to sit in the corner. Not a good idea. So I just watched it last night with my wife, and I just felt so bad for him because it would be difficult, being on the hot seat all the time. I mean, I know that obviously his podcast is a solo episode where he's just sort of talking about things, but he's definitely been involved in heated discussions a lot more than most people. On university campuses, he'll have a back and forth with people. He was on Bill Maher's show. He's been on Joe Rogan's show, and people have asked him tough questions. So it's not like this is the first time he's subjected himself to this. What to learn from it, though, Like, I have to be honest. When I release a book or a series like Strive 21 that just came out, what happens is the publisher then reaches out to a ton of radio stations to interview me about that. So obviously, I'm not comparing myself to Ben Shapiro. I get that, like, I reach about 1% or 3 people, and he reaches billions. But there's still something to be learned here, because I've found myself on interviews, say, with like some Kansas or Missouri, or it doesn't matter where, Michigan, but you get the sense that it's a smaller Catholic station, and you're like, how many people are listening to this, And so what sometimes happens is, because the publisher of the book works with a media person to kind of get the message out there, they start scheduling all these interviews for you. And so what usually happens after a book, like I'm writing a book with Ignatius right now on Aquinas and happiness. Once that comes out, we're hoping late next year, like I'm going to have like dozens and dozens of interviews, and sometimes back to back. And like sometimes you'll get like a 10-minute clip on a very popular podcast, or Fox News or something, and then sometimes you might have like an hour-long interview, and you're like, who is listening to this? And I've definitely been tempted in the past to just be short with people. Like, I don't want to do this. I'm not saying I'm proud of that. I'm not proud of that, but it's just human nature, right? Like, I've got kids, and I'm like, here's another bloody interview. Who's even listening to this? And there's the temptation to be smug, like you're more important than this, and I kind of think that's what Shapiro fell into, like definitely arrogance. Like there was an arrogant, like even if you disagree with the interviewer and you say, well, he did call pro-life positions barbaric and dark age type stuff, it was definitely arrogant on Shapiro's, and I hope that he has good people around him who call him to repent of that, just like I need to repent of that, and just like you need to repent of that. Like again, wherever we are in our, as far as having a sphere of influence, even if it's three people, like only three people, like you got three Twitter followers, three YouTube followers, you still need to be loving and good and not arrogant with those people. So that's what I took away from it. I actually have prayed for Shapiro this morning. I'm sure it's going to be really difficult for him. And I also just want to pray for humility in my own life, that I never get to a point where I think that I'm too good to respond to somebody. And I pray that that's true for you too, right? That you don't ever think that, because pride cometh before a fall. And it was only last week that Shapiro kept saying on his podcasts, like we are the second most downloaded podcast in the world, which is fine. It's a huge achievement, and he has every right to promote it, and I would too, if that was something, if I was succeeding in that way. But we just all have to be careful. I mean, pride is the greatest sin. Sometimes we can think lust is the greatest sin, right? Because maybe shame is attached to lust in a way that it isn't to pride. But pride is what led to Lucifer's downfall. It was pride that led to Adam and Eve, falling away from God. And very often we don't think of pride. We can see it in other people, but we don't often recognize it in ourselves, We talk about other people as if they're some kind of different species. We'll say things like, what's wrong with the people today? As if we're not people. So, one thing I'd recommend for you and for me is to pray the litany of humility today, or every day, because that is the cancer I think we need to root out of our lives, and battle against, because there's just so much joy that comes from being humble. And again, humble doesn't mean hating myself. It just means recognizing the truth about myself. And that might mean that you're really good at something, and that's great. But it's pride that leads to these Twitter battles online. It's pride that leads us to call people out on social media most of the time. Sometimes there can be legitimate reasons, I get it, but I think we should begin with the assumption that it's our ego that leads us into a lot of these different things. And if we can just say, Lord, who am I? I got no idea, Look at that chair there. See that chair? I don't know how to make that chair. I don't really even know what plastic is. I get it's a substance. I don't really know how the hell they make it or where it comes from. Or I don't know anything. I know so few things. And just to realize that we're children before the Father. And our worth doesn't depend on how good we are at something. He just loves us, and he wants us to surrender to that love, and we don't have to earn it. And just to say, Jesus, I trust in you. Thank you that you love me. So, would love to hear your thoughts below. By the way, I did that video last week on footholds, and I did say to you guys that I would read all the comments, and I have read all the comments, and I really do appreciate them all. Here in Australia, it's been really difficult to have Wi-Fi because we've been traveling a lot, so I haven't had a chance to respond to everybody, but I promise you I do read the comments. Thanks.